Well, in this video, I will be solving a past paper question from ACC examinations, which pertains to batch costing, learning costing, as well as target cash flows. It is a very important question for anyone attempting ICAP examinations for cost and management accounting paper. Let us move on to the question. Question number 3 says BFG Limited is investigating the financial viability of a new product, the S-Pro. The S-Pro is a short life product for which a market has been identified at an agreed design specification. The product will only have a life of 12 months. The following estimated information is available in respect of S-Pro, and we are given certain information till point number 5. Let us focus on the question. Requirement number A. It says prepare detailed calculations to show whether product S-Pro will provide the target net cash flows. So we basically have to compute the net cash flows of the company. Let us first try to identify where are these target net cash flows. If you see below point number 5, our target net cash flow of 130,000 is required in order for this project to be acceptable. Therefore, the target net cash flow is 130,000, and since it is net means values of all cash inflows less cash outflows. Let us first write down the cash inflows. Cash inflows will obviously be the sales revenue that we generate from sale of the products we are selling. Moving on to point number 1, and now writing down all the informations. Point number 1 says that the sales should be 120,000 in the year in batches of 100 units. An average selling price of 1050 per batch. The selling prices per batch of 100 units is expected. All sales are for cash. So our cash inflow from sales would be, since we have 120,000 units, so it will be 120,000 divided by a single batch has 100 units, therefore we will divide it by 100 to compute the number of batches. 120,000 units divided by 100 units per batch will give us number of batches multiplied by per batch selling price, which is 1050. So this is the amount of cash inflow or sales revenue which is being generated. We will then subtract all cash outflows. Point number 2 says an 80% learning curve will apply for the first 700 batches, after which a steady state of production time will apply, with the labor time per batch after the first 700 batches being equal to the time for the 700 batch. The cost of the first batch was measured at $2,500. This was for 500 hours at $5 per hour. In this question, I will not discuss the basics of learning curve. For basics of learning curve, you may refer to my learning curve videos in which I discussed how do we compute the values of direct labor cost through learning curve techniques. In this video, I will directly solve the question as per the requirements. Now, to compute the labor cost, what we have to do is to firstly compute the cost of 700 batches. And in our example, the learning curve formula is y is equals to ax power b, and which gives us the average time or average cost per batch. This has been already discussed in previous videos. As per point number 2, last line, we know that the cost of first batch is 2,500. So we can use the cost approach in which we take A as the cost multiplied by number of batches, which is 700, which is our x, and the power of 700 should be the learning curve rate, and the learning curve rate is at log LR divided by log 2, and which is generally provided in question. In our question, if you see the note line, it says that 80% learning rate, the B value is equals to negative 0.3219. So it should be negative 0.3219. it will be equal to 303 303.461, which is our y for 700 batches, and the total cost for 700 batches would be 700 multiplied by our y or average cost, and it is 212,422.7. This is the cost for 700 entire batches. Now to compute the cost of 699 batches, since the question says that the all batches after 700 batches will take the same time as the 700 batch, we know the principles of learning curve. To compute the time for 700 batches or the cost for 700th batch, we have to calculate the cost of 700 batches, which is this much. Now we will calculate the cost of 699 batches and net them off to get the cost of 700th batch. To calculate the cost of 699 batches, we will firstly calculate the y value, and we know that our A is 2500 multiplied by 699 power the B value, which is given in our question, and it is negative 0.3219. So it is 303.6007, multiplying it by 699, and the cost for 699 batches is this much, and therefore the cost of 700th batch will be 205.82. This is the cost for one single batch, which is the 700th batch. Now we can compute our total labor cost. Our labor cost will be, since we are producing altogether how many batches, 1200 batches, the labor cost will be the cost for first 700 batches, which should be equal to this amount, and the cost of 700 next 500 batches will be the cost for 700th batch multiplied by 500. So our total labor cost should be the sum of both of these, and it should be 315,334.9. I haven't discussed the basics of learning curve and why did we apply this technique. Since it has already been discussed in the learning curve videos, my main purpose for this video is to solve this particular question. Moving on to our next cost. Well, the next cost is our variable overheads cost. For variable overheads cost, it has been said that the variable overhead is estimated at $2 per labor hour. So actually, to calculate the total variable cost, we can apply two techniques. Number one, either we must multiply hours of labor by ₹2, which is the variable overheads cost per labor hour, and for this we will have to compute the hours of labor. A simpler approach can be, if you relate point 3 and point 2, point 3 says that variable overheads is estimated at $2 per labor hour, and point number 2 last line says that a single labor hour cost $5. So we can say that for every hour the variable overheads is ₹2 and each hour of labor costs us ₹5. We can calculate a ratio of variable overheads to labor cost. If you apply this technique, you just have to calculate 0.4 of the entire labor cost, which should be 126,133. The other approach is easier, in which we calculate the labor hours multiplied by the variable overheads rate, which is given as per labor hours. But in this specific working, since I have calculated all costs, I will have to compute the labor hours for all 1200 batches, which will take my time. I will recommend every one of you to calculate this variable overheads cost by the hours approach too, and clear your concepts that both values will have the same numbers, same final answers. Moving on to next cost. Further, we have the direct material cost. It says that direct material will be $500 per batch of S-Pro for the first 200 batches. Every batch till the first 200 batches will cost us 500. The second 200 batches will cost 90% of the cost per batch for the first 200 batches. Okay, for material, first 200 batches. First 200 batches material cost would be simply 500 multiplied by 200. This will give us 10,000. Sorry, 100,000. Since it is 500 multiplied by 200. It then says that the second 200 batches will cost 90% of the cost per batch of the first 200 batches. So the second 200 batches will actually cost us 500 into 90%. So the second 200 batches will be 200 multiplied by 450. After that it says all batches from then on. Now by then on it means that after the 400 batch, after you have produced the first 200 batches and second 200 batches, all batches from then on will cost $90% of the batch cost for each of the second 200 batches. Therefore afterwards our cost would be 450 into, we will have to reduce this cost again by 90%, and this will be 450 into 90%, which is 405. So after that each batch will cost 450, and since we had 1200 batches, this should be 800. This represents the cost of last 800 batches. Last 800 batches. I will simply write 800. So this is our total materials cost. After that it says Aspro will require additional space to be rented. These directly attributable fixed costs will be $15,000 per month. Now they are not allocated costs. Remember that these are the directly attributable fixed cost, and directly attributable of fixed cost means that we have to pay this additional cash flow for the decision that we are taking, and it is 15,000 per month. Since we are calculating annual costs, so the rent amount should be 15,000 multiplied by, there are 12 months in a year, 12, and this will be the total of our cash outflows, which comes out to be 1135469. So our net cash flow should be all cash inflows, which is 126,000,000 less 1135469. It comes out to be 124,531. In our question, we were asked in requirement number A to prepare detailed calculations to show whether product Aspro will provide the target net cash flows. Our target net cash flows were 130,000. This was our target, and this is what our actual cash flows look like. So therefore our answer should be no, target cash flows have not been achieved. Thank you everyone for watching the video.